My name is Dawn Harper. I'm 38 years old and I work as a teacher in Chattanooga, Tennessee. For weeks, I poured my heart into planning my own birthday party, imagining an evening filled with laughter, family, and warmth. I sent invitations to my parents and my sister, hoping it would be a chance for us to finally come together. But when the day arrived, the community center stood empty. Not a single family member showed up, no calls, no texts, just silence. I waited for hours watching the untouched food grow cold, my heart sinking deeper with every minute. The loneliness was sharp, but I refused to let it break me. A week later, my phone buzzed with a message from my dad. Your sister's 35th birthday party, $3,000 per person. Pay immediately. $3,000 demanded without hesitation after they had ignored my own celebration without even an apology. Anger surged through me. I opened Venmo, typed in $3, and sent it with a single note, congrats. Then I blocked their numbers and called a locksmith to change every lock on my doors. I thought I had closed that chapter for good. But 48 hours later, everything spiraled into chaos. How would you respond if your family betrayed you this way? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. Growing up in a Chattanooga suburb, I always felt like an outsider in my own family. My dad, Gary Dawson, and my mom, Susan Dawson, poured their energy into my sister, Tara Dawson. At 38, I can still see Tara, 3 years younger at 35, twirling in her ballet leotard while I scrubbed dishes at a diner to save for college. They enrolled her in private lessons, sent her to summer camps in Europe, and cheered at her recitals. Me, I got a pat on the back for straight A's if I was lucky. Focus on your studies, Dad would say, while they planned Tara's next big adventure. I pushed through, working double shifts at a grocery store to pay for education classes. I wanted to be a teacher, to build something meaningful. When I got a scholarship for college, I rushed home to share the news. Mom was on the phone gushing about Tara's audition for a national dance team. "That's nice, honey," she said, barely listening before hanging up. No celebration, no visit. Tara landed her dream job in a flashy downtown marketing firm, and my parents threw a lavish party at a steakhouse inviting half the neighborhood. I heard about it from a cousin, not them. My college graduation. They sent a card with $20 inside. Tara's milestones were always front and center. Her high school prom had a stretch limo. Mine was a borrowed dress from a friend. When she bought her first condo, Dad bragged to everyone at church. My first teaching job at a local elementary school got a nod, nothing more. I'd show up to family dinners hoping for a real conversation, but it was always about Tara's promotions or her fancy vacations to Aspen. "She's going places," Mom would beam while I sat there picking at my plate, invisible. I tried to understand. Maybe they thought Tara needed more support, or maybe I was just too quiet, too independent. But it hurt. I'd call to share a good day, like when my students made me a thank you banner for a class project, and Dad would pivot to Tara's latest client win. Once I overheard Susan telling a neighbor I was fine just teaching, like it was a consolation prize. I kept pushing forward, but the weight of being overlooked never lifted. One summer when I was 16, Dad planned a family trip to Disney World. I was thrilled, thinking we'd all go, but at the last minute they said it was just for Tara to celebrate her dance recital win. I stayed home mowing lawns for extra cash, watching their car pull away. That memory stuck a sharp pang every time I saw Tara's framed photos on their mantle, none of mine in sight. By my late 20s, I was a full-time teacher, grading papers late into the night, saving for a small house in the suburbs. I'd drive by Tara's sleek condo downtown, paid for partly with Dad's gift for her down payment. I never got a dime. When I closed on my house, I called Mom, hoping she'd care. "Oh, that's great," she said, then launched into a story about Tara's new office corner suite. I hung up, staring at my bare living room, promising myself I'd make it on my own. Family events were a painful routine. Tara's engagement party was a spectacle, catered with a live band and a photographer. I helped set up tables, but no one acknowledged me. My master's degree in education went unnoticed. Dad forgot my birthday that year but called the next day to ask if I could help with Tara's car payment. She's under a lot of pressure, he said. I mailed a check hating myself for it, but still hoping they'd see me someday. The breaking point came at a Christmas dinner a few years back. I spent hours baking a pecan pie hoping to spark a moment of connection. Tara arrived late in a designer coat talking about her latest bonus. Mom and Dad fawned over her barely touching my pie. I left early, the drive home a blur of frustration. I realized then that no matter how hard I tried, I'd never be their priority. Still, I held on to a shred of hope, thinking maybe one day they'd see me. That hope kept me tethered to them even as it tore me apart. But it was a spark I couldn't let go, not yet. Years later, I hoped to bridge the gap with my family. I told myself things could change, that maybe Mom, Dad, and Tara just needed a chance to see me as more than the one who always got by alone. So I started with Thanksgiving a couple of years ago. I spent days cooking a full spread turkey, mashed potatoes, pecan pie, hoping for a warm family evening. I texted Tara asking if she'd bring her cranberry sauce to share. Too busy, she shot back no details. I called Mom to confirm, but she said they were going to Tara's condo instead, something about a better plan. I sat at my dining table staring at the untouched place settings, the food growing cold. I didn't cry, but the silence was deafening, a reminder of how little I seemed to matter. I tried again a few months ago with a book fair at my school. It was a project I'd poured my heart into, watching my students light up as they picked out new books. I thought Dad, Mom, and Tara might be proud to see what I'd built. I sent them invites, even called Dad to share how much it meant to me. "Sounds nice," he said, his voice flat, promising to check his schedule. I stood by the school library, scanning the crowd, hoping to see their faces. No one showed. Tara texted later. Work thing came up. Mom and Dad didn't even reply. That night, I sat on my couch, the weight of their absence pressing down, making me question if I'd ever be enough. The next day, I met my friend Adam Miller at a local coffee shop. I hadn't planned to unload, but the hurt spilled out. Thanksgiving's empty table, the book fair, I stood through alone. Adam listened, his coffee untouched, his eyes locked on mine. When I stopped, he leaned in. "You're enough, Dawn," he said. "Your students adore you. Your life is yours, not theirs. Stop chasing people who don't show up. Celebrate yourself." His words cut through the fog, sharp and clear. For the first time, I felt seen, not by my family, but by someone who chose to be there. Adam's advice lit something in me. I didn't need Mom, Dad, or Tara to validate my worth. I could create my own moments, ones that reflected who I was, not who they wanted me to be. That's when I decided to throw a birthday party for myself, a big, bold celebration of everything I'd become, despite their indifference. I wanted music, laughter, and people who saw me for me. Deep down, I still hoped Mom, Dad, and Tara might show up, might finally see what they'd been missing. It was a faint hope, one I clung to even as I prepared to let it go if they let me down again. Weeks before my birthday, I threw myself into planning a celebration. I wanted this to be more than just a party. It was my chance to show myself, and maybe even my family, that I could create something vibrant and full of life. I chose the community center in Chattanooga, a place I'd driven by countless times, its wide hall, perfect for what I had in mind. The theme: the 1980s, my favorite era, with its bold music and electric energy. I could already hear Sweet Child O' Mine blasting through the speakers, see the dance floor alive with neon lights and laughter. This was going to be my moment. I started with the music. I spent evenings curating a playlist, digging through old vinyls for classics like Madonna and Prince. My friend Adam was a lifesaver here. "You need a vibe?" he said, scrolling through his phone at my kitchen table. He suggested mixing in some Michael Jackson and Cyndi Lauper, making sure the tracks would get people moving. We laughed over which songs were too cheesy, settling on a list that felt just right. Adam also offered to help with decorations. He showed up with boxes of fairy lights and neon streamers, climbing a ladder to string them across the community center's ceiling. "This place is gonna glow," he grinned, adjusting a strand of pink bulbs. His enthusiasm kept me grounded, focused on the task instead of my nerves. Then there was the cake. I wanted something bold, a three-tiered masterpiece with fondant records and edible glitter, something that screamed 80s flair. I reached out to Joan Foster, the community center's event coordinator, who had a reputation for making things happen. "You want a showstopper?" Joan asked, her eyes lighting up when I described my vision. She connected me with a local baker who could deliver the cake, and she handled the table setup, round tables with checkered cloths, each with a mini disco ball centerpiece. Joan even suggested renting a sound system for the playlist, ensuring the music would hit every corner of the hall. "This is your night," she said, checking her clipboard. "Let's make it unforgettable." The guest list was next. I typed out invitations on my laptop, my fingers trembling as I added Dad, Mom, and Tara's names. I pictured them walking in, maybe surprised by how much thought I'd put into this. I sent them physical invites, glossy cards with neon designs, and followed up with texts. "Hope you can make it?" I wrote to Tara, keeping it short. I called Mom, my voice steady. "It's my birthday soon, Mom. I'd love for you to come." She mumbled something about checking her calendar. Dad didn't pick up, so I left a voicemail hoping he'd hear the excitement in my tone. I also invited colleagues from school, teachers I'd swapped lesson plans with, the librarian who always shared her coffee. I added a few neighbors like the couple across the street who always waved. The list grew to 50 people, a mix of those I saw daily and those I hoped would finally see me. Every detail mattered. I ordered a photo booth with 80s props, big sunglasses, feathered wigs to keep things fun. I booked a local DJ to spin tracks live for part of the night, giving the playlist a professional touch. I even picked out my outfit, a sequined jacket, black jeans, and hoop earrings, something I'd never dared wear before. Each choice felt like a step toward claiming my space, proving I could build joy without waiting for anyone's approval. I spent late nights sketching the layout, imagining where the dance floor would go, how the lights would catch the disco balls. I wanted it to feel alive, like a moment no one could ignore. But as the date got closer, doubts crept in. What if Dad, Mom, and Tara didn't show? What if no one did? I pushed the thoughts away, focusing on the details. I confirmed the cake delivery with Joan, who double-checked the order. "It's gonna be epic," she said, showing me a sketch of the fondant records. Adam tested the sound system, blasting Billie Jean until we both laughed at how loud it was. I sent reminder texts to everyone, keeping my tone light, but feeling the weight of hope. I told myself it didn't matter who came, this was for me. But deep down I wanted them. Wanted them to see the life I'd built despite their absence. I held on to that hope, fragile as it was, and poured everything into making this night my own. The day of my party arrived, and the community center glowed with 80s vibes. The neon streamers shimmered under the fairy lights, and the DJ spun Sweet Child O' Mine through the rented sound system. The three-tiered cake, decked out with fondant records and edible glitter, sat proudly on a checkered tablecloth, surrounded by mini disco balls. I stood in my sequined jacket, hoop earrings glinting, scanning the entrance for familiar faces. I'd pictured this moment for weeks. Laughter, dancing, and maybe Mom, Dad, and Tara walking through the door. But as the clock ticked past 7, the hall stayed quiet, the dance floor empty, except for the echo of my own footsteps. I checked my phone, hoping for a text, a call, anything. Nothing from Dad. Nothing from Mom. I'd sent Tara a reminder 2 days ago, but her reply was just a thumbs-up emoji. My stomach twisted, but I forced a smile, greeting the few guests who trickled in. My colleague Wendy Walsh stopped by with another teacher from school. "This setup is amazing," Wendy said, snapping a photo by the 80s-themed photo booth. They grabbed some punch, danced to one song, and left within 20 minutes, citing early meetings. A neighbor couple popped in, complimented the cake, and slipped out after 10 minutes. By 8, the hall was nearly deserted, the playlist looping to an audience of empty chairs. I stood in the middle of the dance floor, the neon lights casting long shadows. The music felt too loud now, each beat hammering the silence where my family should have been. I'd poured everything into this night, my savings, my energy, my hope. And they hadn't even sent a message. I wondered what I meant to them, if I meant anything at all. The weight of it hit hard, a familiar ache from years of being overlooked but sharper now raw. I gripped a plastic cup, staring at the untouched cake, its glitter mocking my effort. Had I been a fool to think they'd show up? Was I invisible to them always? Joan, the community center's event coordinator, noticed me standing alone. She turned down the music and walked over, her clipboard tucked under her arm. "Hey, Dawn, you okay?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. I nodded, but my tight smile didn't fool her. We started clearing the tables, stacking plates, and folding tablecloths in silence. Then Joan spoke up. "You know my family's not perfect either," she said, tying up a trash bag. She told me about her own sister, always the center of attention, leaving Joan to pick up the pieces. "I used to think I had to earn their love," she said, "but I learned I'm worth more than their approval. You are too. This party, it's proof of that." Her words landed like a lifeline. I looked around at the decorations, the cake, the effort I'd put in. This wasn't just a party, it was me claiming my space, building something despite their absence. Joan's story reminded me I wasn't alone in this, that others carried similar scars. As we swept the floor, I felt a shift. The hurt was still there, but it didn't own me. I wouldn't let their absence define me anymore. I thanked Joan, her quiet strength giving me a spark of resolve. I'd keep going, not for them, but for myself. A week after my empty party, my phone buzzed with Dad's message. "Tara's 35th birthday is next month at the Grand Oak." It read, naming a swanky downtown restaurant with chandeliers and a wine list longer than my grocery budget. "It's $3,000 per person to cover the costs. Pay immediately." I stared at the screen, my coffee going cold on the kitchen counter. $3,000. For a party they expected me to fund after they'd skipped mine without so much as a text. My pulse quickened, a mix of disbelief and anger tightening my chest. I'd spent years trying to build a bridge to them, only to be handed a bill for their celebration. Before I could respond, another message came through, this time from Tara's husband, Raymond Carter. "Dawn, don't be selfish," he wrote. "This is Tara's big day. If you don't pay, you're letting the family down." Selfish. The word stung sharp and unfair after all I'd done to stay connected. I pictured Raymond, always in tailored suits, standing by Tara's side at every family event I was barely invited to. I typed a reply, then deleted it. What was the point? They'd already decided who I was to them. Then I saw Tara's Facebook post. She'd shared a photo of herself in a glittering dress captioned, "Planning my 35th at the Grand Oak." Too bad some people are too stingy to support family. Dawn, looking at you, stop being a family wrecker. The words hit like a slap. "Kekeo kiet, ngoi fa hoai gia jin." Comments piled up from her friends, some I didn't even know, agreeing and piling on. "What's her deal?" one wrote. "Family first, right," another added. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. I scrolled through the post, each word carving deeper, until I closed the app. They weren't just ignoring me, they were rewriting who I was. I sat at my kitchen table, the silence heavy. I thought about every effort I'd made: Thanksgiving dinners, book fairs, the party I'd poured my heart into. All of it dismissed, and now this, a demand for money and a public attack. I opened Venmo, my fingers steady despite the anger bubbling inside. I sent Tara $3,000, typing congrats in the memo. It wasn't about the money, it was about drawing a line. I wasn't their ATM or their punching bag. I closed the app, my hands shaking but my resolve firm. Next, I called a locksmith. I'd had enough of waiting for them to show up, figuratively and literally. By noon, a guy named Mike was at my door, swapping out the locks on my small suburban house. "New start?" he asked, handing me the new keys. "Something like that," I said, slipping them into my pocket. The click of the new lock felt final, like shutting a chapter I'd left open too long. Back inside, I grabbed my phone and opened my contacts. I found Dad's number, Gary Dawson, and hit block. Then Mom, Susan Dawson, and did the same. Tara's number was last. I hesitated, her name staring back at me, but only for a moment. Block. The screen went dark, and for the first time in years I felt a weight lift. I stood in my living room, the new keys cold in my hand. Their absence at my party had hurt. But this was different. It was betrayal, plain and simple. They'd taken my hope and turned it into a transaction, then a public smear. But I wasn't the person Tara described online, and I wouldn't let their words define me. I'd built a life, my teaching, my home, my small circle of people who showed up when it counted. That was enough. I didn't need their approval or their presence anymore. I'd keep moving forward, not for them, but for me. 2 days after I blocked their numbers, my front door shook with pounding. I froze, my morning coffee halfway to my lips. Through the peephole, I saw Dad and Mom standing on my porch, their faces tight with anger. I opened the door, bracing myself. "Dawn? What's wrong with you?" Dad barked, stepping forward. "Blocking us. Sending Tara $3. You're ruining our family's reputation." Mom's eyes narrowed. "You need to fix this or we'll sue you for defamation," she said, her voice sharp. I stood there stunned, the new keys heavy in my pocket. They weren't here to talk. They were here to demand I fall back in line. I kept my voice steady. "Dad, Mom, I'm done paying for your choices," I said. "You didn't show up for me. I'm not the one breaking this family." Gary's face reddened, but Susan cut in. "You're selfish, Dawn. Always have been." The words stung, but I held my ground, closing the door as their shouts echoed behind it. My hands shook as I leaned against the wall, their accusations ringing in my ears. Sue me. For what? Standing up for myself? I thought that was the end of it. But I was wrong. The next day, I was in my classroom helping a student with a math worksheet when the door swung open. Gary and Susan stormed in, ignoring the wide-eyed kids. "Dawn, we're not done," Mom yelled, her purse swinging wildly. "You can't just cut us off." The students froze, some clutching pencils, others whispering. My colleague Wendy Walsh poked her head in her face, paling. I tried to stay calm. "Mom, this is my workplace," I said, guiding them toward the door. Gary wasn't having it. "You're a disgrace," he shouted loud enough for the hallway to hear. My principal, Marie Thompson, appeared, her expression stern. "Mr. and Mrs. Dawson, you need to leave," Marie said firmly. "This is a school, not a place for your arguments." They didn't budge. Susan pointed at me, her voice shrill. "She's the one causing trouble, slandering us online." I shook my head, baffled. They were twisting everything. Wendy stepped in, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling the police," she said, her voice low but resolute. I nodded, grateful for her quick thinking. Within minutes, 2 officers arrived, Officer Gregory Holt and Officer Karen Mills. Gregory, tall with a clipboard, spoke first. "What's going on here?" he asked, eyeing my parents. Susan launched into a rant about my disrespect and defamation, while Gary waved his arms, repeating their threat to sue. I stayed quiet, letting them talk themselves out. When Karen turned to me, her gaze steady, I explained. "My parents demanded I pay $3,000 for my sister Tara's birthday party after ignoring mine," I said. When I refused, Tara posted online calling me a family wrecker. I sent her $3 as a statement and blocked their numbers. I pulled out my phone, showing the officers screenshots, Dad's text demanding $3,000, Raymond's message calling me selfish, and Tara's Facebook post labeling me a stingy family breaker. The comments from strangers still burned, but I kept my voice even, letting the evidence speak. Gregory skimmed the screenshots, his brow furrowing. "This looks like a family dispute, not a legal case," he said, handing my phone back. Karen nodded. "Mr. and Mrs. Dawson, you can't harass someone at their workplace. You need to leave now." Susan opened her mouth to argue, but Gregory raised a hand. "Take it up elsewhere, or we'll escort you out." Reluctantly, they shuffled toward the exit, Mom muttering under her breath. Marie followed to ensure they left, her face a mix of concern and professionalism. Wendy squeezed my arm. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, though my heart was racing. Back in my classroom, the kids were buzzing, but I redirected them to their worksheets, forcing a smile. The officers lingered to file a report assuring me I'd done nothing wrong. "Keep those screenshots," Karen advised. "They show who's stirring things up." I thanked them, the weight of the day settling in. My parents' threats, their scene at my school, it was a new low. But I felt a quiet strength, too. Wendy's support, Marie's intervention, and the officer's clarity reminded me I wasn't alone. I'd drawn a line and I wasn't crossing it again. Whatever came next, I'd face it on my terms. With the drama behind me, I turned my focus to rebuilding my life. I wasn't going to let the past hold me back anymore. My first step was contacting my lawyer, Leonard Hayes, a calm man with a knack for cutting through chaos. I met him at his office, a small space cluttered with legal books. "Leonard, I need a restraining order against my parents and Tara," I said, laying out the screenshots of Dad's demand for $3,000, Raymond's accusatory texts, and Tara's public post calling me a family wrecker. He nodded, jotting notes. "This is clear harassment," he said. "We'll file for a no-contact order." Within days, he had the paperwork ready, and I felt a sense of control returning, like locking a gate I'd left open too long. Meanwhile, Tara's Facebook post had spread through Chattanooga like wildfire. Neighbors and mutual friends saw it, and word traveled fast. By the next week, I heard from Wendy that the couple across the street had unfriended Tara online, shocked by her public attack. A family friend who used to host barbecues stopped inviting Gary and Susan to gatherings. Their toxic Wendy overheard at a local cafe where people whispered about Tara's post and my parents' scene at my school. The backlash hit them hard. Gary and Susan's social circle shrank, their invitations drying up. Tara's reputation took the biggest hit. Her so-called friends who'd piled on in the comments distanced themselves when the truth surfaced. Tara's grand birthday plans at the Grand Oak fell apart. Without the financial support she'd demanded, the lavish event she'd bragged about turned into a quiet dinner with just her and Raymond. Wendy told me Tara had posted a vague update about focusing on what matters, but the lack of likes spoke volumes. Her social isolation was evident. Friends stopped tagging her in photos, and local groups left her out of event planning. I didn't feel triumph, just a quiet relief. Their actions had consequences, and I wasn't the one paying for them anymore. Instead, I focused on the people who showed up for me. Wendy invited me to her book club where we debated novels over wine and laughed about school gossip. Marie, my principal, checked in regularly, offering coffee breaks to talk about anything but work. Joan from the community center sent me a text inviting me to a pottery class she was hosting. Adam dropped by with takeout, cracking jokes about his terrible cooking to lighten my mood. They weren't just friends. They were my chosen family, people who saw me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. With them, I didn't have to prove my worth. To mark this new chapter, I planned a small gathering at a public park near my house. It was nothing like the big 80s-themed bash, just a picnic under oak trees with checkered blankets and homemade lemonade. I invited Wendy, Marie, Joan, and Adam, keeping it simple with sandwiches and a playlist of soft acoustic songs. Wendy brought her famous brownies, still warm from the oven. "You outdid yourself," I told her, grabbing one. Marie showed up with a deck of cards, challenging us to a game that left us laughing until our sides hurt. Joan shared stories about her latest event disasters, making us all feel lighter. Adam strummed a guitar, humming along to a tune we all joined in on. The evening felt warm, real, like a family I'd built from scratch. As the sun set, I looked at the faces around me, their laughter filling the air. This was what mattered, people who chose to be there, who didn't demand anything but my presence. I'd spent years chasing approval from people who couldn't give it. Now I knew self-respect meant walking away from toxic ties. Family wasn't about blood, it was about who showed up, who saw you. That was the lesson I'd carry forward, one I'd learned the hard way, but wouldn't trade. Thank you for listening to my story. It's been a journey, and I hope it resonates with you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family? Share your thoughts below, I'd love to hear them. If this story moved, you hit that like button and subscribe for more. Your support means the world.